This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
The World Health Organization raises the alarm about the rapid escalation and global spread of the coronavirus. We look at how African countries are addressing social issues arising from the coronavirus pandemic. And the entertainment industry in Guinea reels from events cancellations due to the coronavirus outbreak. Hello and a warm welcome to Africa Live. I am Peninah Karibe. Let's have a look at other stories coming up this hour. In business, Paris club creditors agreed to cancel $1.4 billion of Somali debt. And in sports, Tunisian sportsmen and women training alone during the COVID-19 pandemic shutdown. We start with the latest on the COVID-19 pandemic. The World Health Organization has voiced deep concern about the rapid escalation and global spread of the coronavirus. The pandemic has reached over 200 countries and regions. The number of infections has surpassed 930,000, with the World Health Organization warning it could reach 1 million shortly. And more than 47,000 people have died. The United States has over 1,000 newly reported deaths, bringing the total death toll to over 5,000. U.S. cases have surged by over 26,000, surpassing 216,000, the highest in the world. President Donald Trump has approved a major disaster declaration for 30 states so far. In Italy, a further 727 people have died, taking the death toll to over 13,000. And in Spain, the number of new cases rose by over 1,900, bringing total infections to over 104,000. Iran, the worst-hit nation in the Middle East, has reported over 3,000 deaths. Chinese mainland has reported 35 new cases, all imported. China has also reported 55 new asymptomatic cases. There are currently over 1,000 asymptomatic cases under medical observation in the country. Fighting the coronavirus has become a battle on a global scale, and Chinese health authorities say they're willing to deepen international cooperation and have established an international mechanism to bring together knowledge from experts across the world.
We have established a database of experts from international cooperation. We have held more than 40 video conferences with more than 100 countries and regions, sharing our experience in treating COVID-19. Now that we've received more of such requests from abroad, we will arrange 20 more of such conferences in the near future.
China has also coordinated with the World Health Organization in fighting the virus. It's donated $20 million in support of the organization's efforts to control the global pandemic. Meanwhile, Beijing is coordinating with the other G20 countries in information sharing and vaccine development. It has also coordinated with regional organizations, including ASEAN and SCO, to strengthen the regional response capacity. Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has announced that more than 134 facilities in the country have been identified for coronavirus quarantine, isolation and treatment. But ventilators are in short supply and Ethiopia is seeking external help. CGTN's Coletta Wanjohi reports from Addis Ababa.
Orbit Healthcare Solutions, an importer of medical supplies in Ethiopia, says it is getting more demand for ventilators, with the government expressing need for over 200 urgently. The mechanical breathing device is important to save patients whose lungs are affected by COVID-19 virus. But the company cannot meet demand.
The ventilators are now increasing in price, dramatically increasing in price. Also the shipments, since every countries are locked down, some of the countries are locked down, the cargo, the shipments, we're not finding any shipments in the other one. The quality of the products available in the market, they are not certified, they are not calibrated. So it's a big issue here.
Bilisuma says the cost of a ventilator has now gone up from about $12,000 to over $27,000. Ethiopia says it has at least 435 functioning ventilators currently, including those that have been procured recently. And with a plan of over 1,000 isolation beds, more of these machines are needed. Businessman Addis Alemayo has now launched a campaign seeking medical equipment assistance from China. His business is feeling the impact of COVID-19. His workers are forced to stay at home. Ethiopia's government is also calling for help. It has launched a mobilization drive seeking assistance from citizens at home and abroad for cash and medical supplies such as ventilators. Coletta Njohi, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Another country having a similar problem is South Africa. For more on this, our correspondent Angelo Kupla joins us live from Johannesburg. Angelo, South Africans have been living under lockdown to tame the coronavirus spread, but the country is also lacking critical medical supplies and equipment. What more can you tell us about this?
Well, we found out yesterday during the briefing by the health minister in South Africa, Zweli Mkhize, that in fact South Africa was running short on personal protective equipment. Here we're talking about gloves, we're talking about masks, and we're talking about other medical equipment that are needed to protect our frontline medical staff when they're treating those patients who are coming in and are sort of COVID-19 positive. So we're likely to see, we understand from sources that there will be a plane flying into China to go and pick up some PPE stock, some supplies. We're not sure about the quantities, we're not sure about what's going to be in terms of the actual detail on what's going to be supplied by the Chinese government. But we understand that business sector has also been having discussions with their counterparts in China to see if they can actually source any of those personal protective equipment pieces that are needed by our frontline staff. So it looks like there is going to be a solution. What we don't know yet is what's going to happen in terms of masks and other protective equipment for our South African citizens and people who are living here at the moment. So that's all we know right now.
Angelo, South Africa is now seeking assistance from Cuba and China. Why these two countries?
Well, look, Cuba has a long-standing relationship with South Africa. It's a reciprocal arrangement. South African medical students go and study in Cuban medical facilities. And then we have a lot of medical students who are young doctors from Cuba coming to work in South Africa in some of our rural communities to bolster some of the medical people that we have operating here. So that arrangement has been in place for a number of years. Cuba, of course, as you know, is also working or has been testing a particular drug in its fight against the COVID-19 virus. They've had some limited success there. So it seems like that's part of the arrangement there in terms of what Cuba and South Africa are going to be doing. We haven't seen any details yet on that arrangement yet, but we expect that to happen. And then, of course, with China, it's all about the experience that they've had in terms of their lockdown facility.
Yeah, and Angelo, given that South Africa has the continent's highest COVID-19 infections, what lessons can the country draw specifically from China?
Well, I mean, the lessons have been learned quite quickly and quite early on. Cyril Ramaphosa, the country's president, very early on in the process of the virus spreading in South Africa, announced a state of disaster and acted emphatically less than a week later by declaring a national lockdown in terms of making sure that nobody was on the streets, the schools were closed, and businesses were closed, and only essential staff were allowed to travel. So those lessons were learned very quickly and very early on. There's also that zero tolerance approach that we're taking in South Africa in terms of people found to be breaking the law, breaking the rules or regulations will also face fines or possibly jail time. So those lessons have been well learned. And of course, it's all about the single source of information, where only credible information is released to the media, who then pass it on to the rest of the population in the country. So it's about managing that process, making sure there's no fake news that's doing the rounds, and ensuring that the public broadcaster shares as much information as possible to provide more education for the consumers or for the people living in the country. So some valuable lessons, early days for South Africa, obviously, but hopefully the lessons learned in China that are being applied here will help us to flatten that curve.
All right, Angelo Kupla in Johannesburg, thank you. Nigeria has shut down some of its biggest cities in a move to halt the spread of COVID-19. Abuja, Lagos and the southwestern state of Ogun are in total lockdown. Lagos remains the epicenter of the coronavirus outbreak in the country, and that's where Deji Badmus is now reporting from.
This is what a lockdown looks like in the Nigerian commercial capital, Lagos. The city's ever-busy streets are deserted, gone are the horrible traffic jams the city is notorious for. Authorities here fear that if a drastic measure as this is not taken to check the spread of COVID-19, the city could be the worst hit in the country. The Nigeria Center for Disease Control says the lockdown would give it the opportunity to trace around 5,000 persons who may have come in contact with COVID-19 patients and help it check the spread of the disease. This medical doctor says it's the right call.
We've been clamoring for this lockdown to happen since some time now. When we had just 3 cases in Nigeria, we said right now government should do something so drastic to reduce the number of infections in Nigeria. But let's agree that this is the first right step if we really need to fight this virus, this epidemic.
Across the 3 cities where the lockdown applies, millions of people live by what they earn on a daily basis. Some experts say that could pose a serious challenge on compliance with the lockdown.
If they don't work for a week, it's going to be extremely hard. So unlike probably you and I that probably have some reserves, most people unfortunately don't have reserves. So there has to be some concerted efforts to ensure that while the lockdown still happens, people can get the necessary things they need to live. So it's a whole effort. Everybody needs to pitch in for this to work.
It's a headache government across Africa are battling with in the face of the coronavirus outbreak. The level of poverty on the continent is high, with an overwhelming majority living on their daily earnings. The Nigerian government has begun providing some relief for the most vulnerable. Here at this gathering, government officials are handing out cash of around $13 each to people it classifies as the poorest of the poor.
Well, we have 1 million people, over 1 million across the country, and for the FCT, this particular local government council, we are giving out to about over 5,000 households in this area council.
But the initiative is only a tiny drop in a country where many more millions live in abject poverty and would sure face a further struggle during the lockdown.
It doesn't mean that if there's no coronavirus, there cannot be other sickness. There will be other challenges. Now, the key issue is that you must be able to provide where those people can contact. Should any of the child convulsing, should any of them have malaria or any of those infections or even serious cough that is not corona, so that they can have access to hospital. You must be able to provide emergency medical care during the lockdown.
For now, most of the states in the country are ramping up their response to the disease. Isolation facilities are springing up in states that are directly affected. And perhaps the good news at the moment is that more COVID-19 patients are getting discharged from the hospital and going back to their normal lives. Deji Badmus, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
In South Africa, it's day 7 of a nationwide lockdown. The Gauteng provincial government has launched a COVID-19 sanitization drive in Alexandra, one of Johannesburg's poorest and most overpopulated township. The move is in an effort to stem the spread of the coronavirus. CGTN's Julie Shire reports.
Here in this densely populated area, self-isolating is a privilege. Up to 6 people or more share a shack with no toilet or running water. Gauteng provincial government has had to step in.
This is not how social distancing should happen, but Alexandra residents are desperate and they're queuing to get as much sanitizer as they can.
As part of government solution, 13,000 litres of sanitizer were distributed among residents, while walls and other surfaces were disinfected.
It's prevention and care, because if we can prevent people here just to get the virus, we have saved lots and lots of lives, because you can see the environment here is not conducive. If something wrong happens here, we're going to be in trouble.
Yes, certainly. If this spreads, it will be a human catastrophe, and that's why we are closely monitoring the situation. We are on a daily basis through our provincial command council guided by the National Command Council that is led by the President, assessing the situation and doing different things on a daily basis. We are going to do everything humanly possible to fight this virus and make sure that we also deploy government resources adequately.
This project will benefit 46,000 residents, but it won't be enough. Alexandra's population is estimated to be around 700,000.
We are going to go to all the hostels in Alexandra, all the spaza shops, especially those that are open, that are working. Our responsibility is to decontaminate and to give people sanitizers.
Despite efforts, Alexandra residents are scared.
People are no longer going to work. I'm afraid people will be unemployed at the end of the day. Yes, I'm very scared about this thing, this virus. I'm very worried because they can die, and then they tell people to stay indoors. People, they don't listen. They just roam around the streets.
I think that it will kill us all. I'm very scared. I just missed school. Can you please finish this corona before all of us will die?
Government is trying to keep people at home or in their shacks during a 3-week lockdown, but for many that's simply not an option. And if the virus spreads here, it could do great damage. Judy Shara, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Still in South Africa, authorities have been scaling up testing capacity in light of the increasing incidence of local COVID-19 transmissions. The National Health Laboratory Service has procured mobile sampling and testing units. CGTN's Alexandra has more on this.
The launch of the mobile testing units is one of the initiatives by government to stop the spread of the COVID-19. The units are expected to scale up the capacity of testing citizens around the country. The South African citizens will be tested in large numbers to obtain a true picture of the spread of the virus.
COVID outbreak has moved from an important traveler-based outbreak to local community transmission, where the Department of Health remain concerned that the lockdown will not be enough and that we need to ensure that COVID cases are identified.
We're now gearing up incredibly fast to get to a point of being able to do 30,000 tests a day during the month of April.
Minister Mkhize further pleaded with anyone with symptoms to come forward and emphatically urged communities to stay at home and take the virus seriously. The health department will now procure rapid test kits and seek people to test rather than wait for people to come to the clinics. The health department has also expressed deep regret at the loss of South Africa's HIV prevention pioneer, Professor Jita Ramji. Ramji fell ill after returning from a trip to England in the midst of the global coronavirus outbreak. She was internationally recognized for her work in the field of microbicide research.
Her passing away leaves us all the poorer, but also it creates a very real sense of the seriousness of this infection, and I believe it's important for us to acknowledge that we are facing one of the most formidable challenges and that we need to be taking all the messages about prevention, about containment, quite seriously.
South Africa remains on lockdown until the 16th of April at midnight. Alexandra for CGTN in Pretoria, South Africa.
This is Africa Live. Time for us to take a quick break. Here's what's still ahead. We look at how African countries are addressing social issues arising from the coronavirus pandemic. And the entertainment industry in Guinea reels from event cancellations due to the coronavirus outbreak.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
In Nigeria, health experts are worried that a lack of access to clean water for millions of people threatens efforts to contain the coronavirus outbreak. Here's CGTN's Phil Ihaza with more from the nation's capital, Abuja.
It's the only source of water these riders have to wash their motorcycles. Unclean sources of water like this are common in rural Nigeria. Health experts are now warning that if Nigeria has a hope of combating coronavirus, it urgently needs a supply of clean water for everyone.
We are now at a period where the whole world is ravaged by coronavirus, and the simplest and most effective means of preventing coronavirus is hand washing, and with soap and water. So access to water is not negotiable. Governments have to wake up to their responsibilities and make water available for people in order to be able to wash their hands.
An estimated 55 million Nigerians lack access to safe water pumps or reservoirs. That's according to WaterAid Nigeria. While 75% of the urban population have access to treated and better quality water, only about 42% of households have access to safe water in rural areas. Experts say the central government alone can't tackle the problem. It requires a more collective effort.
This is the time where we need to come together. Management and prevention of coronavirus is everybody's business. So it is good that you are bringing this up. So NGOs, international organizations, charity organizations should come up with a way of providing water to those communities that lack access to water.
The Nigerian government recently secured a loan for various water projects worth over $124 million from the African Development Bank. The plan is to roll out universal access to water and sanitation by 2030.
Nearly 200 million people in Nigeria are at risk of coronavirus if nothing is done to provide them with water supplies. And while the government is urging them to wash their hands, it's not going to be that easy for people who don't have access to clean water. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
Meanwhile, in South Africa, the city of Cape Town has begun to move people living on the streets to the first of many planned temporary shelter sites. The move comes as the city's community services and health department work to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. CGTN's Travis Andrews has more with his report.
While the country remains in lockdown to curb the spread of the coronavirus, there hasn't been many options available to the city's homeless when it comes to complying. But authorities have now begun to move at least some of them to a temporary inner-city shelter, complete with tents, sanitation facilities, as well as food. More importantly, this is regarded as a safe space, where everyone who enters has to first undergo a check for any COVID-19 symptoms.
Done screening inside, and we also put up some tents so that we can put the homeless people in the tents. There are those who are still on the hotspots. We also waiting for them to come. When we're done with this, we said they must stay visible where they are so that the law enforcement can go into all the hotspots and collect them.
More than 200 people are being cared for here, including refugees, the smaller tents being set up or isolation units for those showing symptoms and may need immediate isolation. For many here, everyone's health is of primary concern. The city is enforcing strict COVID-19 mitigation measures here at this safe space, and that includes masks, gloves on, and hand sanitizer. Not only are one's hands constantly sanitized, but social distancing is also strictly enforced, as police keep a close eye over proceedings.
We screen them for the symptoms and the history before taking them in. Should any individual then present with a positive symptom, we immediately isolate them away from the other individuals. Critically here, we must be mindful of the fact that these individuals who may have fever or may have cough may also have other comorbidities that need to be tested for. And so we're working with NGOs who will be able to assist in the screening process.
There are other temporary shelters that have also been identified for the use of street people and refugees and are currently being sanitized so that they can be ready to receive the city's most vulnerable as soon as possible. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
Now, still in South Africa, parents are pulling out all the stops to keep their children engaged as the country adjusts to a 21-day lockdown. So GTN's Julie Shire spoke with parents to find out how they're managing their schedules.
South Africa's lockdown has been in place for just a few days, but children have been home for 2 weeks, leaving parents with their hands full. Yolanda Liebenberg's son is 8 years old. Being stuck at home is not ideal.
It's been quite frustrating not going out. And I can see, especially with Troy, he gets quite frustrated. Us as parents sometimes just want to lie down and read a book, and all he wants to do is have that interaction and play. And he gets quite frustrated when we can't.
More time being spent cooking, baking, playing with toys, and repurposing old games.
I mostly build paper airplanes because my dad inspired me to build different paper airplanes, because when he made a first airplane, I was very amazed by it. And then there was one that I made. I copied my dad, and then I learned from my friends.
There's been more awareness around hygiene and hand washing. Jessica Ginger's son is 7. She's careful about striking the right balance between chores, play, and homework.
Levi and I ensure that he gets this work done every 5 days. We revise it together and all of that. In between, we've initiated a Monopoly game where he gets rewarded for certain activities, like changing the dog's water, reading for 30 minutes, taking a nap, that sort of thing, where he earns Monopoly money, and he can use this money to pay for screen time or to pay for a candy bar or a chocolate.
Some South African schools are providing online classes, and the solution seems to work for some.
I feel like it's exciting because it's easy to do the work. You can just log onto your computer or your iPad or whatever device you're using, and you can just type your work and then submit it to your teachers. And I think that's a new and interesting way of learning, and I feel like it's somewhat more interesting.
But for majority of South African children, they don't have devices or access to the internet, and online teaching will not work. Since schools closed in South Africa and across the world, every parent has tried to adapt to this new lockdown reality. And I am no exception, as I try to bring some routine and normality to my children. Julie Shara, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
A common struggle for countries dealing with the COVID-19 outbreak is to raise awareness while fighting misinformation. In Egypt, media outlets are sending out unified messages about the virus. These messages are broadcast throughout the day on television and radio channels. Here's Adel Mahrouri with more.
When it comes to COVID-19, it doesn't matter if you watch public or private broadcasters in Egypt. Everyone is sending a unified message. The same awareness videos and preventive measures gets aired all day long in what appears to be a government-orchestrated effort.
For right now, it seems to be a blessing because there is a coordinated effort. And don't forget that Egypt is a very large country with 100 million people. And, you know, you really want to fight misinformation, ignorance, which we have a lot of. The government started off with the awareness campaign. It was early. It was maybe before we had just a few cases in Egypt, and it has been wide. It has been spread on broadcast, both radio, television, particularly also print.
To keep viewers engaged, some producers had a creative take. With attractive music, simple lyrics, and colorful wardrobe, they've presented songs about COVID-19. Some have urged people to stay at home. Others have dictated hygienic measures to be taken at home.
If you're really well educated and cosmopolitan and exposed, you might think they're just silly. But, you know, there are a whole lot of people and children too who need simpler messages. I've seen similar ones where they had, you know, people dressed up in costumes and singing, you know, go away virus or wash your hands 20 seconds. And I think that's okay, because really in the end, your mission as a media person right now is a little bit different to the usual, and you are really trying to devote your time to public health. This is a public health issue.
Since February, news about instabilities in neighboring countries and the nation's fight against terrorism faded away. COVID-19 has been leading headlines in Egypt.
COVID-19 has become Egypt's prime enemy. The government is imposing a partial curfew nationwide. With millions of Egyptians staying at home, the media's role is crucial to keep the public informed about the outbreak. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
In Uganda, some people are accusing sections of the media of spreading misinformation on the coronavirus pandemic. Media analysts say the rush to break news that could be misleading is scaring the public. Isabel Nakiria reports.
It's close to the news hour in this newsroom, and journalists here are trying to hit the deadline. And the coverage of the coronavirus pandemic is putting journalists on alert. The urgency to put out information fast, according to some analysts, is causing panic.
Some of the journalists have been a little too excited. They want to beat, the Ministry of Health, to this story, perhaps, announcing phantom cases that are not there and doing things that in many regards can be misconstrued or can be even actually seen as being unethical.
Social media has been very popular, with popping out latest incidences of COVID-19 cases and at times hiking numbers. But the social media space is used by anybody, and relying on it has also caused confusion. Social media campaigners say media groups need to quickly correct this.
If there is a vacuum, then people who are not necessarily meant to be commentating about something end up filling that void. So the simple solution is that media houses need to be active on these platforms. They need to get their staff to be active, to distribute all the right information, the correct and accurate information that is being brought to us by the scientists on the latest that is happening with the virus.
In Uganda, updates about new COVID-19 cases are announced by the Ministry of Health and the WHO. But incidences about possible death of coronavirus patients has raised concern. Uganda has so far not recorded any COVID-19 deaths. Infectious disease experts warn false alarms about the coronavirus hinders efforts in the fight against the disease. They encourage people to protect themselves against the virus by arming themselves with the correct information. Media experts blame such alarmist reports to lack of proper research.
I've seen, different accounts from different people saying that possibly this story, the people who should have taken point on it should be, the science journalists. But you ask yourself, in Uganda, have we built capacity in regards to science journalism? Do we have a critical mass of science journalists who can ably tell this story? Because it's a very complex story. There are so many layers that you have to unpack.
While some religious leaders have been arrested for spreading harmful information in relation to the coronavirus in Uganda, experts say the media must play its role of educating the public about the disease rather than being part of the problem. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
You're watching Africa Live. Coming up in business news. Paris Club creditors agreed to cancel $1.4 billion of Somali debt. And Eskom to declare force majeure on power purchase contracts.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Somalia is set to receive relief of 67% of the debt it owes to the Paris Club of Creditor Nations. The decision came after the club decided to restructure the Horn of Africa nations' debt, including cancelling $1.4 billion owed. Several of Somalia's creditors, including the United States, the UK and Norway, as well as the World Bank and the IMF, endorsed the decision during negotiations. Separate bilateral discussions with the creditors will be held to finalize the process. The IMF further announced that several creditors will grant Somalia additional debt relief. 100% debt cancellation deals with some countries is possible under the IMF's heavily indebted poor countries initiative. Somalia is the 37th country to qualify for relief under this process. In South Africa, state power utility Eskom has told independent producers of wind-generated power that it will declare force majeure on their power purchase contracts due to a lack of demand for electricity. Since the start of South Africa's lockdown, energy demand has plummeted as businesses and mines close completely or go into care and maintenance. From Johannesburg, here's CGTN's Angela Coppola.
The announcement by Eskom essentially means that due to a situation beyond their control, it doesn't need all the power from wind producers in the late evening and early morning due to low demand.
The difference here is that the wind power contributes mainly in the early hours of the morning, like 2 a.m., when there's very little demand for electricity. Whereas the solar power contributes during the day when there is normal demand. So there is no discussion, there is no plan, and there is no point at all at this point in extending this force majeure to any other IPPs.
COVID-19 has led to a substantial drop in demand. 9,500 megawatts less power is being consumed during the peak hours at the moment.
Eskom really has got, you might say, too much generation capacity and not enough what is called flexible generation capacity. The coal-fired power stations are not very flexible, and they're also very intermittent. They come on and off sort of randomly as a result of failures.
The relationship between Eskom and the independent power producers is bound by watertight contracts.
We are in a partnership with our suppliers, and we have given them ample notice that this we need to repeat this again, and we've made it clear to them that it's a low probability event. So there is no need for pushback.
The power purchase agreement defines the contractual agreement between the utility and the IPPs.
It also depends on the goodwill between the parties to the contract. It makes little sense in these times to stick to the letter of a contract, when there is a national emergency. I think the parties need to be reasonable, and they need to show that they are being reasonable.
They will be given an additional day for however many hours they have lost in a production day. So everybody will be exactly in the same position they would have been had there been no force majeure. Nobody will be left worse off.
The force majeure will test the relationship between the suppliers and the utility. Bottom line is, though, that everybody has to show goodwill so that we can get through this crisis together. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Meanwhile, Africa's most industrialized economy has lost its last investment-grade credit rating. The ratings agency Moodys issued the notice late on Friday night, changing its rating on South Africa to Ba1 with a negative outlook. Moodys cited the country's high levels of public debt and weak growth as the key drivers for the decision. CGTN Sumitra Naidu exploring what this means for businesses and citizens alike.
The timing couldn't be worse. South Africa is in a recession and dealing with the spread of COVID-19. The decision by Moodys is no real surprise, though. The economy was struggling for some time.
Up to 25% of the world population right now is going through the same situation, essentially a lockdown. In terms of economically, where this leads things, the ratings review doesn't matter that much, but the risks are high that South Africa is looking at the deepest recession that the country's seen since 1985, which would be, the pre-apartheid and the apartheid years.
South Africa has now been downgraded to sub-investment grade by 3 international rating agencies. The country will be immediately removed from the World Government Bond Index. Accessing any new funding in the market will be extremely difficult for South Africa. It will also come at a higher cost.
This is still a severe piece of news because, of course, South Africa's government bonds now going to be dropped from the world index, which means that foreign investors at some point do need to let go of those bond positions, although it is thought that initially, because of what's going on in the world trading and so on and the world markets, that this will be paused for now. But later on, of course, those government bonds will have to be dropped from foreign portfolios. Essentially, this does mean it will accelerate rand weakness and also put further pressure onto the domestic market and also the currency market. But we have to say here that, you know, there's no tier one risk that is bigger than what impact this virus is going to have on the economy.
Most worrying will be the decline in foreign investment, not only because South Africa is at a higher risk now, but also because the whole world is in limbo, not knowing when the spread of COVID-19 will dissipate.
Essentially, at the same point, the world economy is looking at a recession. If this situation does persist beyond a couple of months, that will go beyond the global financial crisis of 2007. So this world economy productivity is completely at a halt. We just have to hope that there will be either a cure found or that the virus will hit a peak and life will get back to normal sooner rather than later.
It's going to be a tough road ahead for South Africans already having to deal with high unemployment, rising costs, increasing poverty, all in an economy that is not growing. Sumitra Nadu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Tunisia's central bank plans to lower interest rates as the country tries to shield its economy from the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. CGTN's Adnan Shawashi reports from Tunis.
Tunisia Central Bank Governor Marwan Al-Abbasi informed the Speaker of the House of People's Representatives that the bank is working closely with financial institutions and government agencies to reduce the key interest rate again.
Reducing key interest rate again is necessary in order to stimulate economic growth. Lower financing costs can encourage borrowing and investing during this period of economic crisis. The situation could improve in the next few months. People and businesses will be tempted to invest again.
The central bank governor said Tunisia's foreign exchange reserves have exceeded $7 billion for the first time in months, covering 115 days of imports.
These reserves were at 14.5 billion dinars, around $5 billion and 85 days of import in the same period in 2019, which means an increase of 30 days of import. The energy gap has been reduced with crashing oil prices and imports plummeted.
Authorities say the new measures are aimed at guaranteeing the sustainability of businesses and to preserve jobs and citizens' purchasing power.
The impact of the coronavirus could be worse than expected. People only think of buying food. Cars and houses are not a priority for consumers. The central bank and the state in general are looking for efficient ways of reducing economic losses by encouraging consumption.
The central bank governor says the banking and financial sectors are committed to a fast and efficient implementation of the new economic measures. Prime Minister Yassir Farfar had announced a series of social and economic measures costing around $900 million to protect citizens and protect the country's economy. However, some analysts and economic advisors of the Premier insist that the country will need additional resources to limit the negative impact of COVID-19. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
For the past 4 years, a startup academy in Nigeria has been teaching entrepreneurs how to build sustainable businesses. And beyond structural support and business education, Ethiopia has been training them on how to access government loans to expand their businesses. CGTN's Deji Badmas tells us more.
A typical session for young entrepreneurs underway at the Ethiopia Startup Academy. They're taking through all the rudiments of starting a business and sustaining it. Short for Ethiopia Startup Academy trains about 10 entrepreneurs at a time, 4 times a year, fortifying them with all they need to be successful. Founded by a Swede and franchised in Nigeria in 2016, Ethiopia is a backbone for quite a number of startups in Nigeria, helping them to develop and grow their business.
People had good ideas, but they had very bad structures or foundations. And we felt with the proper coaching and training, we would have better businesses that would have the right foundation to grow.
Ngak says Ethiopia was essentially founded to fix the projection that 70% of businesses are bound to fail. So they've been providing entrepreneurship education to business founders in Nigeria, introducing them to an ecosystem of other innovative minds with access to business development experts and coaches. But beyond providing help for business structures, Ethiopia also teaches entrepreneurs how to access the Central Bank of Nigeria's loans to enable them scale.
The CBN is partnering with Ethiopia through the Nisal Microfinance Bank to train entrepreneurs who are planning to get loan from the microfinance bank to grow their SMEs. Ethiopia gives them foundational training to help them understand how to use these loans and what to use them for, and also to help them build capacity that would enable them pay back the loan to the bank.
You can never have... Zachary Fakir is a fish farmer. He's been at Ethiopia Startup Academy for about 3 months now. He says with all he's learnt here, he's ready to hit the ground running.
I know exactly what to do from 1 naira to 50 million naira now with what I've learned here. So basically, I'm ready. Once I get the loan, I will know how to apply what and how to get to the last and also get results and also pay back.
In the past 4 years, Ethiopia has trained over 180 entrepreneurs, mainly from the north of the country. They're aiming to help even more by building a larger hub to include incubator, accelerator and business support services. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Abuja, Nigeria.
This is Africa Live, coming up after the break. The entertainment industry in Guinea reels from events cancellations due to the coronavirus outbreak.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Innova Robotics is the first company in Africa in the MENA region that builds its own robots. The Tunisian startup specializes in developing mechanical systems that can autonomously navigate. Authorities in Tunisia have deployed the robots to enforce the country's lockdown and help prevent the spread of coronavirus.
Pearl Guard robot is patrolling in the capital city Tunis. This scene has become familiar since the beginning of the general lockdown and the coronavirus outbreak in Tunisia.
What are you doing here? Show me your ID. Are you aware of the general lockdown measures? You must respect the rules and go home.
The robot is a four-wheel drive mobile base powered by electric motors and batteries, allowing it to patrol for up to 8 hours in the governorate of the Greater Tunis district.
Tunisia is fighting a deadly virus and disease. The Commission of Security and Defense at Parliament approves the use of robot and the latest technology to protect citizens and security agents from COVID-19.
Citizens are proud of this Made in Tunisia robot. The machine can ask questions and interact with the public.
Without the coronavirus crisis, the robot would never have been used. The authorities seized the opportunity for public interest. I respect the robot like any police agent.
This is a good initiative. We hope the technology and robots will also be used in the health sector and the administration to limit direct contact and stop this contamination.
A remote interface is provided with Pearl Guard. It allows policemen to manually control the robot remotely from the central command unit at the Interior Ministry or any police station or patrol across the country. Innova Robotics has developed a new machine which is dedicated to healthcare. The system was built for elderly people to keep social contact with their families. The updated version will be used at hospitals to communicate with patients infected with coronavirus. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
In Guinea, the government has decided to cancel all public cultural events involving more than 100 people. This is part of efforts to curb the spread of the coronavirus. CGTN's Tuli Shabalala takes a look at how the measures have impacted the entertainment scene in the West African country.
Social-cultural events in Guinea-Conakry generate thousands of dollars. Now the country's entertainment industry is set to make a huge financial loss due to the ongoing coronavirus pandemic. Promoters of shows, artists and the Guinea media are the ones feeling the pinch the most.
When there is a stop at these cultural events, that means that we have no advertisers, that we have no customers, and that will impact economically on our financial profitability, therefore impoverish our accounting. If this health crisis continues, it will be a big loss for us.
All live shows have been cancelled. It's only activities that bring together less than 50 people that have been held today. The room is large enough to respect the safety distance measures.
Some promoters or showbiz companies had already made financial commitments. They doubt that they will be reimbursed later.
I had already invested a lot of money by buying airline tickets from foreign artists, and at the last minute I was told I will not be able to make a profit to be able to afford another financial base to allow me to continue to do the festival. We accept it because it is a public health problem, but in reality, the state should accompany us after the cancellation. If this is not done, our structures will no longer be able to cope with this loss.
The first case of coronavirus disease was declared in Guinea on the 12th of March from a lady from Belgium. The government has taken steps to close the country's borders to limit the spread of the disease. Tuli Shabalala, CGTN.
And coming up in sports, Tunisian sportsmen and women training alone during the COVID-19 pandemic shutdown.
Africa Live. Find your voice.